Good morning, everyone. This morning, I'd like to talk on one paragraph on this text, Opening the Hand of Thought, page 106, if we have this text. Paragraph 4 of page 106. Let me read this paragraph. Only when we let go of all such ideas will our life find peace in the purity of full life. Because it is just these dissatisfied thoughts and our being tangled in ideas of existence or non-existence that throw our lives into anxiety and drags us into suffering, fighting, hopelessness, and despair. It is through the posture of letting go of these thoughts that we are able to discover the absolute peace of life. This is almost a conclusion of Okumura Roshi's explanation about what Zazen is. This part of this text, he's talking about the significance of Zazen practice within the modern civilization. And beginning, he said, in modern society of technology, science and technology and economy. People are always chasing after something. That means people always have a dissatisfaction. That means we are not good enough, or the condition we are in is not good enough. Therefore, we have to work hard to improve and gain some goal, some better situation. So people are always looking for something outside or in the future. So our life become competitive with other people or with ourselves. So we are always running, chasing after something or escaping from something. That is, according to Buddhist teaching, that is a typical structure of our life becomes samsara because of our desire for satisfaction. We separate our life or this reality into two sides, desirable and not desirable, or meaningful and not meaningful. And we want to go that side, get into that side, but often it's not. We are not so successful, so we start to struggle, and we don't know what to do. So we need some way to find a peace of mind, and peace of mind and dissatisfaction cannot be together. So how can we find a peace of mind within this busy life? And yet another point which Okumura said is, even though we need a peace of mind, that is satisfaction, just as we are and as it is, so we should not be lazy. We should work diligently. Then what is this energy that allow us to work diligently without desire for satisfaction? That, I think, is the main point of this section of this book. And he introduced the Buddhist teaching of middle way. And middle way originally in Buddhism means middle way between self-indulgence and self-mortification, two extreme ways of life. But in Mahayana, middle way become more like a philosophical. That is the middle way between the idea or thinking of Wu and Mu, Wu is being, Mu is non-being, and we cling this side or that side, or more popular Buddhist word, form and emptiness. We cling to form and chase after those material things, or we cling to emptiness and I don't care about all those things. But we need a middle way, being free from both extreme about our life. And next he said, our Zazen practice is a practice of this middle way, being free from either philosophical idea of we need to achieve something, or there are something which allow us to be happy if we gain that thing, or nothing will matter. So we, according to Dogen, our practice is just sitting. That means we diligently practice, and yet we don't look for anything without seeking mind or gaining mind. We practice diligently. And he explained how to sit. And last two paragraphs I talked last week, he said we should really just sit. Even we should not do self-observation. That means if we sit, and sometimes we feel my zazen is getting better, I become little by little, calming down and free from, the dissatisfaction. If we think such a thing during zazen, of course that is not zazen anymore. That is thinking, one thing we have to avoid. Then he said, then this practice must be very dissatisfactory. And he said, that is a matter of course. And the point of this practice is being free from the desire for satisfaction. So we need to be settled down in this practice without a desire for satisfaction. And he said that is possible and that is important, because at the end of the last paragraph, he quoted Okumura Roshi's saying, that is, there is no reason to expect the reality of immeasurable and unbounded life to satisfy your puny little thought. Puny little thought, puny, small, tiny. We translate this word, this expression, your puny little thought. Another possible translation is little thought of small self, your small self. Small might modify you or the self instead of thought. Anyway, that means we are such a small being within this boundless university. I mean universe, boundless world. And yet we think this world is created for me, to satisfy me somehow. And only if we find the truth or reality of that reality, that reality could satisfy me. But Okumura Roshi is saying is this boundless universe is not created to satisfy this small self, small being, but somehow we have desire to satisfy by searching and awakening or discover the truth. Then that truth might satisfy these persons. And mainly what I said last week was this is not only our zazen, but this saying by Sawaki Roshi is almost a pivotal point of Uchiyama Roshi's practice. What he's talking about here is not only about our sitting practice in the Zendo, but if we are familiar with Uchiyama Roshi's life, we can see, this expression, Sawaki Roshi's expression, and what Uchiyama Roshi is saying is about, or not about, it came from his personal experience, or the process of seeking the way. So I'd like to continue to talk about that side, not only our Zazen practice. So here he says, if we, in a sense, if we give up the desire for satisfaction, then we can find, he said, the absolute peace of life. When we read many books written by Uchiyama Roshi, sometimes he wrote about the process of his seeking the way. I talked a little bit last week, but first, when he was around 14, 15, 16 years, he was a teenager. He aroused a bodhicitta in his way-seeking mind, and that he said he didn't want to live in a mundane way of life that is, most people seeking fame and profit, or power or success. But he wanted to live based on the truth of life, or truth of the self. And yet he didn't know what is truth. So his starting point is to find what is truth. And he started to study Western philosophy. So he's searching the truth. But many teenagers had such an idea, I think. But in the case of Uchiyama Roshi, because his family are pretty rich, he could pursue that path. Many people cannot, walk such a path, because we have to study to learn some kind of knowledge or skill to live, and also we become busy for finding girlfriends or boyfriends and how to compete with other people. Before we become 20, our life becomes very busy. So we cannot search the truth. But in the case of Uchiyama Roshi, he didn't need to work. He didn't need to worry about, economical, financial side of his life. He said, until he became a Buddhist monk, he never washed even a handkerchief. All those things are taken care of by his housemaid. So he started to search the truth by studying Western philosophy, and he also studied religions, Buddhism and Christianity, and also in his 20s he married twice. So instead of searching satisfaction by chasing after fame and profit in the worldly way, but he was chasing after the truth or love and spirituality. But when he became 27 or 8, after he finished master course in graduate school in Western philosophy. He became a teacher at a Christian Catholic seminary. He said that he wanted to study Catholic theology to understand Western philosophy, and also he had real desire or aspiration to become a Catholic. But after 6 months, he found it's not possible. So he resigned from that job and returned to Tokyo, and he married again. He married in his early 20s. And his first wife died a few years later with TB, tuberculosis. And he transmitted tuberculosis from his first wife. So he lived the rest of his life with TB. So he was physically very weak person. But after he quit that job, he married again. And his second wife also died while she was pregnant, within a few days. That very painful, sad experience made him resolution to become a Buddhist monk. That was a big change for him. Until then, what he did was reading books and thinking. And when he made this decision to become a Buddhist monk, I think he found that he didn't want to find a satisfaction within fame and profit, but he wanted to find a satisfaction to searching the truth, love, and spirituality. And yet he failed. So I think what he wanted when he made decision to become Buddhist monk with, instead of changing the object from fame and profit or material things to something mental or spiritual or rational, I think he found that he needed to change himself, not the object of desire to satisfy his desire. So I think that was the very basic reason he wanted to become a monk. And after, as I said last week, after he became a monk for 3 years, he practiced very strict Zazen practice with Okumura Roshi and his disciples. That was during the war. And after 3 years, Okumura Roshi didn't have his own monastery, so his disciple had to leave that temple because of the bombing in Tokyo. School children had to evacuate from Tokyo, and they occupied that temple. So Okumura Roshi's disciples had to leave the temple. So they didn't have a fixed place to study, to practice anyway. But after that 3 years of very strict Zazen practice, Okumura Roshi found what Okumura Roshi said was very true. What Okumura Roshi said was, Zazen is good for nothing. So I think even though he understood intellectually Zazen is good for nothing, but he had some expectation, by practicing Zazen, using this body and mind, he could transform, he could change his deeper desire for satisfaction, even not only the material mundane things, but something intellectual or mental or spiritual. So he expect Zazen practice help him to change himself. But after 3 years, he found he didn't change at all, even through such a very strict Zazen practice. that made him more suffering. He wanted to transform himself, and yet he knew in Sakura's saying, we cannot expect anything. And yet he couldn't stop practicing Zazen. So he was what they call dead end. He couldn't go forward, and yet he couldn't withdraw. He was really dead end, and he continued to practice in such a condition for several years until he became really tired. That was end of after World War II. So even Japanese people were starving. So it was really difficult externally, but internally he had really very serious difficulties. And after several years of that kind of struggle, that means he wanted to change himself. He wanted to become free from desire for satisfaction. That's why he practiced Zazen, and he couldn't stop it, and yet he couldn't expect that transformation. Such expectation is a problem, at least according to Sakura's teaching. Anyway, after several years of that kind of struggle, one day he was too tired, so he couldn't think about such a thing, but the only thing he could is simply just sit, and there's no energy to think about it. And he said that was the first time he felt some peacefulness in Zazen, when he lost the energy to struggle. And a few years after that experience, Sakura said this saying during the Rohat session. This saying means, there is no reason to expect the reality of immeasurable and unbounded life to satisfy your puny little thought. That means until he became a Buddhist priest, he was looking for satisfaction, not the material way, but in spiritual or mental way. But it didn't work for him. So he wanted to practice to become free from desire for satisfaction. But when Okumura Roshi heard this saying of Sakura, I think Okumura Roshi was about 40 years. He became a monk when he was about 30s, and he had a struggle almost 10 years. So he was already 40 years old. And when he heard this, he found that his motivation to practice or to become a Buddhist monk, to become free from desire for satisfaction, is another form of desire for satisfaction. He expected if he become free from desire for satisfaction, they can be satisfied. That is a kind of a twisted form of desire for satisfaction. That is what he found when he heard this saying of Sakura. Of course, he knew as a theory, or Buddhist or Zen teaching, he knew what Sakura said, even from the first time he listened to Sakura's teaching. So intellectually he knew that, but Sakura's saying didn't penetrate his entire body and mind. But he said when he heard this saying of Sakura, he said his entire life became upside down. and he said he shed tears. That means from when he was a teenager and until he became a Buddhist monk, about 15 years of kind of searching the way. And after he became a monk, for 10 years he was struggling. But finally he was really became upside down. And this upside down was he was a very intellectual person. So he thought it's a matter of course. You know, the container of something finite, there's no way, you know, infinity can be fit in. But Okumura thought that is what he wanted to do, to catch or grasp this immeasurable, boundless reality into his little container. And he was struggling because the infinity didn't come into his finite container. And he found that. So he said, it's simply like a very simple mathematics. Finite cannot include infinity. That's all. So infinity is infinite, and finite is finite. That was simply he found when he listened to this saying of Sawaki Roshi. So, and he said, this is not so-called enlightenment in the traditional Zen teachings, but this is a matter of course, very simple thing. But his way of life completely become opposite. And that was the time he finally found a peace of mind. That means I cannot grasp or catch or possess the reality, infinite reality. So only thing he could do is open his hand. Then we find we are part of it. It's not a matter of I have to catch it, but we are already there from the very beginning. That is very simple reality. So to me, this is really important point. Not only in our Zazen practice, but entire practice of Buddhism or Zen. That this is what Dogen Zenji said in Genjo Koan. When we convey ourselves toward myriad of dharmas and try to carry out practice realization, then Dogen Zenji said that is delusion. But myriad things, that means infinite reality, came toward the self and allowed this self to carry out practice through this body and mind. So what Okumura Roshi found, I think, is the same thing with what Dogen Zenji said in the very beginning of Genjo Koan. So as an idea or theory or philosophy, this is a really simple thing, and yet it's really difficult. Even our motivation to satisfy our desire with certain things outside ourselves, such as fame and profit and success or status or power, or something spiritual or mental or intellectual. As far as we are searching or try to get them, then the object of our desire is different. But what's happening inside ourselves is the same thing. I feel something is lacking. So if I get something from outside and to fill this empty space, then we can be happy. When we found that that is a problem, then we try to study and practice something like Buddhism and try to become free from such a desire to satisfaction. But that desire to be free from satisfaction, desire for satisfaction, is another form, another kind of a symptom of desire for satisfaction. So, Uchama, in his process of searching the way, he had different kind of pivotal point to change. But this was, I think, his final change. And he said, this is not in enlightenment. This is not the end of his practice. But he said that that moment was beginning of his real practice. That means he, continued to search the truth. And he found that this continuous searching without satisfaction is the way, this immeasurable, boundless life manifests itself through this person. If this person becomes satisfied, then we stop practice, we stop making effort. So here we find two sides. One side is we find we don't need to struggle. And yet another side is we need to keep making effort. So keep diligently work without desire for satisfaction, or without, how can I say, being pulled by desire for satisfaction.
Being what?
Being pulled by desire.
Got it.
So this is a really subtle change, but this subtle change made the meaning of his life completely opposite. That not to gain something important that makes this person satisfied or this person become greater or wiser person, but he found that we are already there, so we don't need to struggle to get it, to be there, and yet on that ground we have to make effort. But commonly we think we feel there's something lacking, therefore we practice. Then we expect we find some kind of peace of mind. Then if we struggle to find a peace of mind with this desire for satisfaction, then there is no way to reach there. But with peace of mind, we make effort. Then there's no struggle there. That is a very subtle difference. So, he continued to practice with his students, and until he became 63. He continued, 5-day session with younger people. And when he found it's not possible to continue to practice Zazen because of his physical condition, he retired from Antaiji, and yet he continued to deepen his understanding and deepen deepen better expression of what he found or what he experienced, until very day he died. He died when he was 86, I think March 13th in 1998. on that day he could walk. He took a walk, and he wrote a poem in his diary. And in that evening he died. And a friend of mine wrote that was the full moon day. Full moon day of March means in the lunar calendar, that is the second month of 15th day of second month. That means the day Buddha passed. Buddha entered Nirvana. And the friend wrote, Okumura Roshi's phrase was really beautiful and peaceful. So until the day he died, he diligently working in the way he could. After he retired from Antaiji, he said to practice with younger people, what to teach, what to work for the world is not his job, his work anymore, his practice anymore. But he said his practice after retirement was simply seeing his own life and death. And he did from when he was 63 to 86, more than 20 years. And he wrote some essays and poems about life and death, from his experience of his own aging, sickness, and dying. So that was kind of his offering to the younger generations, because all of us go to that direction. So, even after this experience, he didn't stop practicing, or rather, he diligently continued to practice to share this reality or teaching. So he didn't lose diligent work, effort, and yet he was satisfied, or he has peace in mind. He didn't find anything from outside. But whenever people come to talk with him and ask him questions, he really talk face to those people and give anything he could offer. So he didn't look for something to satisfy himself, but his life was very in poverty. He wrote many books, but he asked the publisher, the president of the publisher established that company to publish Okumura Roshi's books. Not Okumura Roshi, but a few other people's books. So Okumura Roshi knew that person very well. So he asked the publisher to give him copies of the books and gave the books to his disciples and students. So he didn't get almost any money from his writing books. And he said, out of 86 years of his life, that period, he had a regular job, and regular job, and regular income was only the 6 months. He worked as a teacher of a Catholic seminary. Rest of his life, he just received whatever coming, without asking anything. Until he was a Buddhist monk, he could live in such a way because his family was rich. But his father had a company, but his father's company bankrupted when Okumura Roshi was about 20 years old, so he was still university student. And yet he could continue studying, and even he could marry twice. So I cannot imagine how rich his family was. Anyway, in a sense, he was lucky, but because of that, he suffered, I think. He said after he became a monk, he had to do everything, and his life became really poor. So he has, because he didn't experience anything, that kind of, work. So he had to train himself from the very beginning, even from how to wash his clothing, how to, repair his robes, and even he couldn't ride a bicycle. So he couldn't go shopping by himself. So he had to ask someone else to go shopping. So he was very kind of a overprotected child. So when he tried to become independent person, he had a really difficult process of training himself. But somehow he, went through that kind of practice in a very difficult condition. Now I start to talk on this paragraph. So when we let go of all such ideas means our thinking, if I do something and get that thing, I can be satisfied. That kind of ideas. Will our life find peace in the purity of full life? So when we stop chasing satisfaction, the purity of full life can be found. That means we are supported by this life, not only life as our five skandhas, but these five skandhas are living together with all beings. This network of interconnectedness supports us. And if we try to find our personal satisfaction, then we have to fight against others, or compete with others, or fight against this person in order to get who I want to be. We need to fight against who I am. But when we stop that kind of struggling, then we find this purity of full life supporting us. And because it is just these dissatisfied thoughts in order to find satisfaction. And our being tangled in idea of existence or non-existence. This is a too extreme way to think. Or that throw our lives into anxiety because we want to be there or we want to get that thing and yet we cannot. This is a source of anxiety and drag us into suffering, fighting, hopelessness and despair. Those things happened because of our, according to Okumura Roshi, and also I think according to Buddha, caused by our desire for satisfaction. That means somehow we don't like who I am, or we feel this condition is not good enough. Therefore, we have to make effort to gain that thing somewhere else or sometimes in the future. That cause our life suffering. And it is through the posture of letting go when we sit. So he's talking about Zazen. when we sit and letting go of these thought for satisfaction, that we are able to discover the absolute peace of life. I hope you find the absolute peace of life in this zazen. But often, even we sit in the zendo and try to letting go, but still we are seeking something that satisfies us. If it's not worldly things, it's something like spiritual or even enlightenment or awakening. As far as we are looking for satisfaction, this practice is not yet, how can I say, on the basis of immeasurable and boundless reality. But we found, when we find that we are already, within this boundless, immeasurable life, that means we are given, this life and this environment as a gift. We didn't pay anything. So when we found that we are already there, then we can start to work on that basis, basis of peace, on absolute peace of mind, to make it even better. During the last Genzoe, we studied Mucho Setsumu, or expounding dream within dream. In one section, he discussed about putting, what is that? What did he say? I forget. Something like putting head on the head.
Oh, yeah. Roof on the roof.
Yeah.
Head above head.
Yeah. Usually this expression, putting head on the top of the head, means doing something not necessary or something extra. But Dogen interpret this expression to make the reality already perfect, make into more perfect by our making effort. So our diligent work is not because this condition is not perfect or not good, but we make effort to put one more perfect thing upon the already perfect. Or there is another similar expression, such as putting flower on the golden brocade. In Zen tradition, this is also used, this expression also used something meaningless or something extra, because golden brocade is already beautiful. There's no way to put a flower on it. But Dogen used this expression as our practice, our making effort. Our making effort is to put a flower on the golden brocade. It's not this network of interdependent organization is not something lacking. It's perfect. But by making effort to practice or to work for others, we put a flower on it. So our practice making the reality that is already beautiful more beautiful. So there is in this practice there is both sides. That both sides means peace of mind and making effort or diligent effort. It's already 11. I think he continued the same point next few paragraphs. So I stop talking today. Any comments or question, please?
The last point about putting a flower on the golden brocade. Is it that the golden brocade cannot be improved upon? That there's that notion, it's already perfect. There's nothing that could make it more perfect. Is that the reason that we're using the image of the golden brocade?
I think so. That means we are part of the golden brocade. So if we don't know this is already perfect, and we can even destroy the beauty of golden brocade. So if we become a healthy, wholesome part of golden brocade, then our practice add the beauty to that golden brocade. Otherwise, we could destroy or injure the beauty of golden brocade.
There's something tremendously beautiful about that image, that it's already perfect, and our presence, our awareness, our willingness to engage.
So in that sense, our practice is participation. In that process. Golden brocade is not a fixed thing, but it's moving and changing. It's a dynamic thing, and we become a part of that dynamic movement.
Participation, There was another question. Early on, you were using a phrase about not practicing to satisfy. Do you remember the phrase that had to do with not practicing to eliminate dissatisfaction, or not practicing? I can't remember quite the phrase that you were using right now.
What did I say?
Is anybody else? Oh.
Please.
Well, last Sunday you talked about how one of our goals for practice could be to stop trying to search after satisfaction. So we're trying to get rid of satisfaction. But that in itself is...
Right. A form of trying to get satisfied.
Right. So it just keeps circling around.
Okay. So the thing that I was wondering about is there's also a notion of being attached to the fruits of one's labors, which to me is a little similar, or I'm wondering how similar that is to practicing to eliminate dissatisfaction or to become satisfied. Is similar, or is it similar to being attached to the fruit of one's labors? As if that's the motivation for my practice, is the fruit of my practice, which is different than I practice to practice.
You mean you become satisfied with what you experience or find, discovered?
Well, I'm thinking that satisfaction is no longer the motivation or the criteria for deciding to practice or for motivating the practice.
So, what is your question? Could you say it again?
If I'm concerned with the fruit of my labor, if I'm concerned with the results of my practice, then that's a different motivation than
for example, while Okumura Roshi has such a final pivotal point, he practiced with struggle. fortunately or unfortunately, he could find any satisfaction. But someone else could find some very satisfactory result through some kind of experience. And he said, that person might think, this is Dharma, and I found the, immeasurable, boundless life. I experience it, I get it. I think that there's a possibility. But after Okumura Roshi found satisfaction is not a matter anymore, he still keep making effort. That means he didn't think this is a perfect. This is not a perfect. And yet, the motivation or energy he continued to work diligently is not satisfaction, but making this better and better. So there might be difference between these two examples, but I cannot say what is the real difference. Do you have some idea?
I don't know how to explain that. But to be able to talk about satisfaction and dissatisfaction, the desire for satisfaction, the desire to, or the aversion of dissatisfaction, as to be able to recognize that as some of my motivation, some of the time, is really healthy and helpful to me. And it indicates that there's another form of motivation that's not oriented in this way. And to be able to touch that and to have that, the closest, or to be able to touch that has some of the beauty of putting a flower on an already perfect bouquet.
Well, for example, when I work on translation, when translation is completed and it's published, of course I have satisfaction, I'm happy, but at the same time I have sadness. It's done, therefore I cannot change anymore. And especially when I found something imperfect. So both are there. And that kind of a, in a sense, feeling of dissatisfaction allow me to make more effort for the next translation.
Well, you're fortunate you have a next translation.
And I think in Dogen Zenji's expression, this continuous making effort is called a matter of going beyond Buddha. Going beyond Buddha.
Wow.
He wrote a chapter or fascicle of Shobogenzo entitled Butsu Kojoji, that is going beyond, matter of going beyond Buddha.
Matter is the first word, M-A-T-T-E-R?
Yes, matter, yes. And that is very important expression in Soto Zen tradition from China. Please.
Isn't that very, very similar, if not identical, to the notion of Gyoji?
Continuous practice.
Gyoji.
So we are always imperfect. Therefore, we continue to practice. But this continuous imperfect practice is complete perfect practice. Not for this individual person's effort, but as an expression of this universal movement.
Golden brocade.
Yeah. So Dogen try to express this ceaseless effort without desire for satisfaction from many different perspectives. Please.
So the thing you just said, that Dogen was trying to express this from many different perspectives, is that also true of different activities?
Yeah.
So does it mean zazen being good for nothing?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a special thing?
I think
that unusual or unique about zazen? Or is every activity, could every activity be like that?
Zazen has its own uniqueness.
Mm-hmm.
In the zendo, sitting in the zendo is kind of a quiet and peace, and there's no object.
Right.
So we can let go of all thought safely. But if we let go of all thought when we are working in the kitchen, it's dangerous. But there is a way, cooking in the kitchen can be the same practice. That means if we cook to satisfy this person, and yet if we prepare meal for other offering to those people who eat, then this is a practice of not for personal effort, personal profit.
Mm-hmm.
And yet to offer the better meals, we have to continue to make effort to learn what the best way to deal or cook each ingredient. So all the activity in our daily life can be the practice of same point, and yet each activity has its own uniqueness, I think, also. Okay. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much. Next week, next Sunday, because Rohat session start on Monday, so we don't have Sunday morning activity.
Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it.